focus our time talking about today. Now, what makes this even harder is that you are running as a digital marketer, you're running 20 different channels. You have email, you have PPC, you're doing some retargeting on Facebook, you're possibly also spending money on SEO, and you have all these different things that you have to try to put some sort of value to. Now, what makes this even worse is that there's just too many tools to track them with. And it's really, really hard to pick out an analytics tool when you're not a technology guru. And making sure that you can measure your marketing efforts sometimes doesn't work in specific analytics tools. So you have to use different tools to measure specific channels. Now, I hope at the end of the day, everybody here has Google Analytics. I mean, if you don't have Google Analytics, I think there's a different discussion we should be having, because Google Analytics is the holy grail of analytics online. So definitely make sure that you have GA set up on your site. Now, I have the opportunity to work in SaaS a lot, so a lot of times we're using Kissmetrics. Kissmetrics is a user-identifiable platform, and it tracks people over the lifelong journey, whether with your product or service. So we use that because it builds a customer database. Not saying you have to, but I'm just saying it's a really good tool to be able to track lifetime value for SaaS. So the examples I use today will be with Kissmetrics and Google Analytics to give you a better understanding. Now, what matters, though, is that it doesn't matter what channel you're using. You have to be able to prove ROI. Even with these hurdles of different types of analytics tools and different channels, everybody that is out there doing marketing right now in the digital space has to prove ROI for blog management right now. People who are doing social media every day, it's becoming more and more complicated, and you have to prove your return on investment. I mean, I think email marketing is one of the better channels, allowing you to capture the return on investment that you put into it. But this is, once again, another channel that is a hurdle of getting the return on investment numbers back. And then, of course, the last one is going to be your pay-per-click. This is really, really important. If you are spending money, you must be making sure that you're getting a complete return on investment back, if not getting exponentials off of those numbers. So with all those hurdles, you and your team still have to make sure that they're actually able to track this information. Now, what I want to do is tell you about the one tracking trick that we use that rules all of these tools. It works in every single channel you can do, and it's also going to work in almost every single analytics tool that you can use as well. And it's really simple. All channels and all analytic tools work with UTMs. Now, UTMs are a very simple standard that was created online to allow people for tracking. Now, what a UTM is an urchin tracking module. For those of you out there that have been around in the industry for some time, Urchin was what Google Analytics was before Google bought it. It was Urchin Analytics. Now, Urchin had came out with a way to add these tags to the end of a URL so you can track where that URL was, as well as track any campaign information along with it. Now, we can see, of course, we have a small example of our website, which is effinamazing.com, and then we can see all these random codes behind it. But let's break that down just a little bit so you can get a better understanding of what each one of these mean. Now, at the first one, we're going to notice that we have the URL. We have to have the URL. If we're sharing this on LinkedIn, what we're going to want to do is make sure we have a link back to our site. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you're sending out an email, you want to make sure that you have the link that drives them to whatever property that you're looking them to go to. Now, next, you're going to want to make sure that you have a campaign source. You'll notice that we have UTM_source on top, and then, of course, that campaign source was actually assigned to Google. And I'll go into campaign source in just a little more detail after we walk through how this UTM works. Now, next, you'll notice that we have the UTM as medium, CPC, which stands for cost per click. Next, you're going to notice in there we have UTM campaign, and this one is going to be focused on the product. Next is going to be campaign term, which is actually a non-required field, but really, really helpful. And then what we're going to do is jump into the campaign source. Now, when you have a UTM source, a campaign source, this is going to be the source that the link came from. So for an example, if I was doing Google AdWords, the UTM source potentially would be Google. Now if I was posting a link on Facebook, Facebook would be the source. Now if I was sending an email out, let's say I was sending out a newsletter through MailChimp, MailChimp would now become our source. So the source is going to be the original source at which people found that URL and then directed back to your site. Now the next one is going to be the medium. Now a medium is very simple to understand. This is going to be the medium in which they got to us. So if they had clicked on a PPC ad, we may say CPC or PPC. We may also just say paid acquisition. Now if somebody was, of course, clicking on a banner ad, we would put banner ad. If somebody was clicking on a Facebook post, we would potentially write post as the medium because they clicked on a post to be able to get to our site. Now, there's a lot of different ones, right? So for even email, you have an email, the original source was MailChimp, but the way that the message got there was was the email, so that is definitely going to be the medium in that example. Now next is going to be the UTM campaign. Now the campaign is very important because in the hierarchy of the way these work in analytics, the campaign is typically at the top of the hierarchy, so things end up rattling underneath of it. So in this one, this is UTM campaign product, which means that this was actually a link that was left inside of our product and directed somewhere else. Now there's other ways that you can look at this stuff. Say you're running a 10% off weekend sale. Well, the campaign is probably going to be that week off. All of those different back into the campaign, and you can start to prove ROI on an individual campaign, such as content. In this example, of course, one of the ads that we were linking to was to KISS metrics. So what you'll notice is, of course, we want to be able to focus in on the content. Now, some people use content for their A and B testing as well. So if you're running, you'll notice we have content A and we have content B. Some people are using these types of links in their marketing so they can measure the revenue that's given off of an A/B test in an email, an A/B test on a landing page, lots of different ways to look at it. Now, the last one is actually one of my personal favorites, which is UTM term. Now, in a lot of situations, UTM term is going to be what you use for your keyword. And for the folks in this call who are actually using AdWords, all you have to do is put a curly bracket, the word keyword, and another curly bracket, and it will actually assign the keyword to term and give you dynamic keywording. And that will allow you to really understand what keywords are working. But if you were to use this in an email, let's say that you had an email that was being sent out in a newsletter, but every one of those links on the newsletter were directing people back to the same place. What I would potentially do is change each one of those UTM terms to the word that the person clicked on. So that way I could better identify what keywords were people clicking on in that email, or what sections of that email were people clicking on. Now, one thing I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with is that if you're not measuring it, really, what's the point of even doing it? In this day of age with digital marketing is that if you don't have some sort of analytics platform set up, if you don't have some sort of tracking system set up, why do it? Because you can't measure whether it was successful. You can't measure whether it failed. If all of your efforts go to failures and you don't know that, then you're simply wasting everybody's time. So if you're not measuring it, what's the point of even doing it? Now, we've gone over the way that you can obviously think about a UTM. The UTM source is going to be the place that it came from. The medium is going to be the means of which it got to you. And of course, we have term, content, and campaign. But how do you build these, right? Now, the most common one is going to be on Google. So Google Analytics and Google have a Google Analytics URL builder. So if you just went to Google right now, typed in UTM builder, you would get Google's as your first result. Go check it out. Really, really easy. Here's an example of what it would look like on my screen. It's going to be really simple. It's going to have the website URL. You're also going to have your campaign source, your campaign medium, so along that. Now, this makes it super easy. But the only problem with that is you don't really get to store the information, right? You want to track your UTMs over time because you're going to forget what it means in 6 months or a year from now, and you're always going to want something to refer back to make sure that you understand what that UTM was. I'm not going to remember in 9 months one link I created for Facebook, but if I wrote it down, I would have that opportunity. Now, there's a really cool way to do this, and that's just to keep a log of your UTMs. This is going to be an example of a Google spreadsheet that we have built here, which allows us to store the UTMs and as well as build the end URL. You'll notice off to the left-hand side, we have DM for Dan McGaw, the creator. I have notes in it, so that way people know where to do it. And then we're able to fill in the campaign source, name, medium, and now, if you want access to this spreadsheet, I can send this to you. Just shoot me over a tweet, and it's at Daniel McGaw. But what this also does for you is it builds the entire URL. The URL is going to be built based upon a formula. So that way, once you're done filling out all this information, you simply copy and paste and put that link wherever you want. Now last, we've actually built a tool that makes building UTMs even faster, which fits right into your Chrome browser. If you're not on Chrome, please download Chrome, check it out. You'll be able to get the Chrome extension. But what it does is just makes it nice and easy to build these inside of your browser. So we'll pull in the URL from the page, as well as we'll mention the campaign, medium, and source. And then, of course, you can copy that immediately. We also make it so that you could save to a Google Sheet if you had wanted to. But either way, just let me know if you have any questions about the UTM spreadsheet, and I can send that over as well. Now, another thing that we see people do with UTMs is they don't tend to share them on social media when they're really, really long links. What they tend to do is shorten them. So you'll see a lot of companies use Bitly, which will shorten the URL before they put it on Twitter so it will fit in the tweet. But other people do it on Pinterest and Facebook just so that way you don't see all the crazy code of how you're following people. And this is a really common practice. So definitely check out Bitly. You'll be able to drop your URLs in there. They'll shorten them out. They'll be nice and little. And as well as it makes it so it just doesn't look like you're tracking people all over the web, which is really, really nice. Now that we've gone over what is a UTM and how can you make them, let's jump into a couple examples that are going to help you get started in building UTMs to track your return on investment. The first example that I want to talk about, though, is blog management, because this is really important. We do a lot of content marketing here at our company, and we focus on getting a return on investment from every bit of content we do. Now, one of the things that happens with blog management is you're like, well, how do I really measure how much money is spent? Susan's been writing that blog post for like a couple days, and how do I measure that? Well, it's actually really simple. All you have to do is start using time tracking. And it actually sounds kind of funny that people don't use this to better understand where their time is going. Every single employee at our company, we might be an agency that obviously does do consulting, but we actually don't do billable hours here. We only work with people based upon a retainer. But yet, everybody in our company tracks the exact time that they spend on almost every single task, and it's all tracked through Harvest. This webinar right now, I'm running a timer in the background that is tracking the amount of time that went into this so I can effectively measure the return on investment. Now, you can do this same process whenever you're creating a blog post. Simply start tracking the time that you're doing while writing it. And as most people would understand, this webinar starts as a blog post. And I wrote that blog post and tracked all of my time to make sure I knew exactly how much money we were investing into all of this. Now, you can do this very simply as well, and it's not very complicated. Once you track the time, all of that will go directly into your project management tool. Into your spending $3,000 or $5,000 on a bunch of content to land one client makes a lot of sense for us. Now, even though I track my time that way, I tracked my time all the way through this, and I wanted to make sure that I could get every bit of detail I could after that happened. So even for the email that I sent out to my email list today, there was a tracking URL that was on all of those emails that then, of course, landed on the landing page to sign up for this. And we'll be able to, of course, get that information later and then better start to understand where is our investment going and then how much did we get in return. Now, just to keep moving on, you need to be tracking your content marketing is a big point. I also want to show you where you can find this information in your analytics tools. Now, for everybody out there, if you don't have Google Analytics, we have a problem. So I'm hoping everybody does. Now, if you open up your Google Analytics account, you'll notice on the left-hand side you're going to have acquisition. That's number 1. You're then going to want to go down to the all campaigns, which is number 2, and then you'll notice that you have your primary dimensions, which is going to be number 3. And you can actually click on each one of these and see how they change between all the different stuff that you have. Now, if you were to just click on the normal report, let's say that you have revenue tracking. What you'll notice off to the left-hand side is we have our campaign names. As I was telling you, campaign names are the hierarchy, the highest part of the hierarchy to measuring. So you're going to want to make sure that you have an appropriate campaign name which is set up across all of the different things you'll be using to promote that campaign. So for an example, this campaign that I'm on right now is called ROI-UTM. That is the overarching campaign. You'll be able to see the number of sessions that have come to your site because of that specific campaign. But you'll also be able to measure all of the actions that those people took so you can do better analyzation and improve your conversion rates. So we can see the total number of new sessions, total number of new users, our bounce rate, pages per session, all of the vanity metrics. Now for my business, we only care about revenue. The rest of the stuff does not matter that much. We can see transactions and we can see revenue. Now what you'll notice is, of course, we can see which one of these campaigns are driving the highest amount of revenue. And if we're tracking how much time and investment went into each one of these items, what we'll be able to do is compare the two numbers and now be able to see the exact return on investment. We'll notice this campaign down here had potentially a lower amount of revenue, but it might have a higher amount of revenue per person that's coming through. The conversion rate might actually be better. So it's very, very important to do analysis of all of this so we can better understand things. And as we can see, these two campaigns, even though they might have been less money, they had a higher e-commerce conversion rate. And this is the exact reason why you want to invest in making sure you use UTMs. Because that single UTM that was used on all of those links for this campaign, we were able to identify that we should be readjusting our efforts to, of course, convert with this campaign because we're making more money. So really, really simple. Now let's distill this down again. Once again, it is the money made subtracted by the money spent. If you're not making more money than you are spending, you have a problem. And if you cannot tell that you're making less money than you're spending, how are you going to fix the problem? So you need to make sure that you're using some sort of analytics tool and some sort of UTM tracking to make sure that you can get the full picture. Now let's use an example for email marketing. And I really enjoy this company. TaskRabbit, if you haven't heard of them, check it out. You can simply just open up the app and say, hey, listen, I need somebody to go to the store and fetch me a jug of milk, and I'll pay $15 for it. And if they're in your area, you will get somebody who will go fetch you a gallon of milk for $15. Like, it totally works. Sometimes you're in a need, you need to do it. Now, whenever they send out an email, they obviously want to measure the impact. And what we can see on this pretty email, we have a logo, a picture, the summer savings, $15 off, and then find help now, a major call to action. Now, if they were going to be focusing on what UTMs they need to do, they're driving people back to the site. So, of course, the URL at the top is going to be TaskRabbit. The source where they sent the email from is Campaign Monitor, because that's what they use for their email. You'll also notice we have the medium, which is email. As I said, that is the way the message got to you. This is also the summer savings campaign. So what we'll be able to identify is that summer savings is the campaign, because this could be used across not only the email, but the advertisement. Maybe they have pop-ups on the websites. Maybe they have an affiliate program, but the campaign would be the same across all those. And then lastly would be the UTM content, because this potentially was part of an A/B test. So potentially another email was sent out just like this, except for instead of it saying find help now, it said get help now. So we want to make sure that we're tracking all of these different variations to give us the most amount of return. Now, after this email goes out, what we can do is immediately turn to our analytics tool and begin to track how these UTMs act in our funnel. We'll notice off to the bottom left-hand side, we have the campaign name, and we have multiple different campaigns which would be running, and we can see how each one of those interacted with the funnel. As we can see that there might have been more volume for the 10 off, but the referral offer actually had a lower conversion rate as well. And as well as if we look all the way down the funnel, though, towards purchase, this had a higher purchase rate. So we're less interested in people purchasing, or excuse me, viewing our products. We're more interested in people purchasing our products. So even though this had bigger volume, this had a bigger conversion. So by using these UTMs, I now better understand I should possibly look at spending more of my time, more of my money, and more of my effort on the referral offer rather than the $10 off, because my conversion rate is better, which means I will get a larger return on investment. So pretty simple, pretty straightforward. If you need help trying to understand using your analytics tool, once again, hit me up on Twitter. More than glad to help you out. Now, as I was showing you earlier, you can use the Google URL builder, which is found online. Just Google UTM builder. You'll find the Google one. You'll notice on the left-hand side we have campaign medium. That is exactly how it's going to appear in your analytics. And a common area where we see people make mistakes is that they end up making the word banner one time capital. Another time they accidentally put a lowercase b. Next time they only put one n instead of two n's. What's really important is that these are going to show up the exact same way, case sensitive, from the form builder, the way that they're going to show up into your analytics. You want to make sure that they match exactly. Because if you have multiple people saving UTMs and you're all saving them somewhat differently, nobody's going to be able to run efficient metrics on how you're generating return. Now let's talk about our last example, okay? And this is probably one of the most important ones, PPC. Now, pay per click is really, really important to track because obviously you're spending money. If you're spending $10,000 a month and you're making $5,000 in return, that is not a good equation. You're losing $5,000, and nobody wants to lose $5,000. So you want to make sure that you have UTM set up so you can also track which keywords are profitable, which ad groups are even profitable, or isn't the fact that Google AdWords is profitable compared to Bing. And for all of you out there doing paid acquisition, Bing is super cheap right now. Go check out Bing. It provides amazing returns. Not as big of a network, but it still has great volume. So for an example, if this was for gnc.com, we would have their URL. We'd probably put the UTM source as AdWords if we were using AdWords. Now, once again, if you're using Bing, you probably want to put Bing on there as the source because it's a different source. Now, the medium is PPC. You can consider AdWords PPC, and you can also consider Bing PPC. So that's something where the medium would be potentially the same, but the source would be different, which would give us better analysis on each network if we want to do further digging. Now, of course, this campaign is the summer savings. And then lastly, we have the UTM term with curly bracket, keyword, curly bracket. Now, that's really important because if you set that up correctly in AdWords, you'll be able to see the profitability of each individual keyword, which is very, very important. Now, what we'll notice on this page is this is going to be a revenue report which I ran in analytics. On the left-hand side, we're able to see direct, paid, email, social, content, organic, then as well as understand the direct total value that came in from that, the total revenue, average revenue per person, the lifetime value, how many paying customers, and then even our churn. Since we're effectively tracking all of our different channels, and especially tracking our paid, what we're able to do is find out that we're making an average of $430 on these people. Now, this is really good, but we'll also notice that we have a fair amount of churn from those channels. And this is why it's very, very important to make sure that you're using UTM in your tracking. Because if we're able to isolate all of our emails and see how that impacts churn or impacts our lifetime value, what we can see is that we potentially are leaving $110 on the table if we focus our effort on email, when we should be focusing our effort on the paid acquisition. Now, if we really wanted to focus any of our efforts, we would try to increase our direct, but increasing direct can be a little more difficult than you might think. I mean, a lot of that has to do with brand recognition, other different things where people can't click through, so definitely really, really important because we like that high lifetime value. Now, what I want to end off with is that all channels and all analytics tools work with UTMs. UTMs are one of the simplest, most effective ways for you to track your marketing efforts on the internet. If you're leaving links on Facebook, leaving links in email, doing an affiliate deal, you should be using UTMs on all of those links, and we couldn't have made it easier for you. Just go check out effinamazing.com/UTM. Download that free tool. It'll be really, really easy, and then you'll be able to get on and running and track all of your marketing campaigns moving forward. Hey, thank you very much for having me. This has been great so far. Shema, it'd be great to know if there's any questions and see how I can best service everybody.
Awesome, Dan. Thanks for that. It was really great stuff. All right, we've got a few questions coming in. Looks like one of them is, can this tool be used for mobile apps or, marketing with mobile?
Yeah, so with UTMs, you can use them with mobile apps, but you're going to need a link attribution company as well. Because if you want to measure the installs, you're going to need to have some sort of link attribution tracking. There's companies out there like Tapstream, AppsFlyer. We use branch.io for a lot of our attribution tracking. And what happens is we take our campaign information, we build that inside of the link attribution company's format, and then they give us certain URLs we share in different places, and then they obviously tell us if somebody installed the app, not only clicked and made it through, but they store like campaign term, campaign medium, campaign source, so that way what we're able to do is now start to run numbers on which advertising or messaging is giving us the most installs, and then be able to drive return on investment from those installs. But you're going to need a link attribution company as well.
All right, and it looks like someone's asking about, if we need to write individual URLs for each campaign. Is there an easier way to get around that, or?
So you will want to make sure that you customize your UTMs for each individual campaign. So if somebody was, of course, if you're driving all the traffic back to your website, and you're using 5 different channels, well, you're going to need 5 different UTMs for each one of those channels, which would be 5 different URLs, even though they're all headed to the same place. The easiest way to make that happen is, as I was saying earlier, check out the UTM Chrome extension that we built. We have a presets function in there, so that way you can save presets for your most commonly used things, and it'll make it a lot easier for you to build, copy, and paste all of your UTMs. Some people use the Google spreadsheet method that I had talked about before, but yes, there is a process to it. It does take time, but the value is there.
All right, and it looks like we have another question from Brad. He says, Dan, our experience is that UTM codes can get scrubbed out depending on what the channel and ad is running through. Are you really saying that 100% of UTM codes should be trackable back to GA without any drop-off?
If everything in the world was 100% actionable, none of us would be alive, right? So, like, internet is never 100%, and that's something you're always going to have issues with, is something is potentially going to break. I don't know which advertising platform that are scrubbing your UTMs. I have heard of some platforms which do tend to drop them based upon a redirect, but I have not had the issue with Google AdWords, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. We do get all of our links coming back to our site, and they're not being scrubbed. Now, I will also add this. There is some people out there that have ad blockers on which will not allow you to track this information. There's also a lot of people that use different Chrome extensions which will garble your UTMs. But that's just part of the internet. I mean, if everybody on the internet was 100% anything, we'd have massive problems. And in analytics alone, if you don't see a 5% variance in certain things, then you have something wrong. Because nothing is going to be 100% accurate, no matter what you use. Anything from Salesforce all the way down to Autopilot HQ, there's always going to be something that's a couple percent off.
Okay, and we have a question from Roy. He's asking if, can you use Google Analytics if you're using lead pages for Facebook ads but with no website?
I don't see why you wouldn't be able to use Google Analytics with lead pages. Lead pages allows you to drop their an analytics script on their pages. I'm not sure if that's available on a free or a paid tier, but you can put the Google Analytics script on a leads page.
All right, and you mentioned a few companies for tracking with mobile apps a little bit ago. Could you repeat any of those?
Yeah, of course. So one of the ones we really like right now, because they allow us to do what's known as deferred deep linking and deep linking, is branch.io. They have a link attribution part to it. I would say that their link attribution for acquisition is not the best in the entire marketplace, but they are one of the best when it comes to deferred deep linking. The best for the link attribution are going to be companies like AppsFlyer. AppBoy as well has another pretty good attribution model. There's also a company called TapStream. Yeah, those are a few. And if you want some help when picking them out, definitely just hit me a note on Twitter, Daniel McGaw, and I'll be able to help you there as well.
Okay, and it looks like more question from Trevor. He says, you mentioned Autopilot HQ. Are you using this for making marketing automation? And what would you recommend for a startup?
So we use marketing automation in all kinds of different stuff, everything from Autopilot HQ all the way up to Marketo and Pardot. There's a lot of different tools out there. I would love to give you a recommendation, but I know nothing about your business. A startup is very vague, right? Because there's companies that are funded $200 million that are called startups. So I don't really know what that means in this day and age anymore. But it really depends on the business model you have. If you're a SaaS business, you choose one type of automation. If you're a sales business that's doing B2B sales, you have a different automation suite. So I would need a whole lot more information to give you some recommendations because there's like 300 automation tools. Autopilot is one of the ones that's very well respected. A lot of people do like their tool, but at the same time, Intercom.io is also considered a marketing automation tool because it automates emails and messages to your customers. It just really depends on what do you need, and I don't know that answer based upon the word startup.
Okay, we have one final question that popped up. Doesn't using shorter links on social networks hurt brand awareness since the brand's domain will be hidden?
Nobody gives a shit about your brand. Really, you really think they're like, hey man, Pepsi.com, oh, I gotta get that, I gotta get that. No, nobody gives a shit, right? Like, if you have Bitly.com, it doesn't hurt your brand, right? Like, what hurts your brand is when you say, we're fucking stupid at brand. Like, if you really want to make sure that your brand is present, don't have typos, right? Like, if you really want to make sure that you don't hurt your brand, then put out good content. But the Bitly URL is going to be the least of people's concerns when they're clicking a link The biggest concern that people have had in the past is where does that link really take me? Now, the great thing is that with Facebook, if you do drop a long URL in it, Facebook no longer shows URLs in their posts. So it will still show a link, but it will show it now as an image. With Twitter, you have to shorten URLs because Twitter is going to force you to shorten your URL. Whether you like it or not, they're going to try to shorten it to a t.co. Now, if you are worried about brand, what you can do is what cool companies try to do, and doesn't really help a lot, is create your own branded short URL. And Bitly actually offers this as a service. Bitly will allow you to go purchase a short domain. So for an example, Wistia, which is a large video streaming company, is one of our clients. They have a shortened link which says Wistia in it, and it's a shortened URL, and if you use Bitly at all, it automatically replaces it with them. Now, to me, that would be brand, right? Because that's just cool, it makes you feel good about your brand. But using Bitly isn't going to hurt your brand.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Dan, for sharing that with us today. That was about 40 minutes, but I think our audience would say was very well spent. We're getting a lot of good feedback coming in our comments, and thanks for taking the time to do that webinar, Dan. Any final thoughts from you before we close up shop?
No, I mean, I thought this was awesome. Really, really appreciate it. So if I could ever be of service for anybody, please let me know. As you can probably see my desktop now. But this was a lot of fun, and I appreciate everybody coming.
All right, thanks everyone for being here today, and you'll get an email from us tomorrow with a link to the recording of this presentation, so watch for that. And we hope you join us for future webinars, and Dan, thanks again, we appreciate it.
All right, bye everybody.